Most people did not die because of the zombies. They died because they had no food, no clean water, and no hope left. The truth is, the undead did not destroy the world. We destroyed ourselves. When the power went out, when the stores became empty, when neighbors fought each other for a single can of beans, that is when humanity truly ended. The zombies only walked over the ruins we left. My name is Daniel Cole. I was a soldier once. I wore the uniform of the 82nd Airborne Division, trained for wars that never came, and believed I was prepared for anything. But nothing in my years of service prepared me for this. Not for the day the dead stopped staying dead. When the outbreak began, life collapsed faster than anyone imagined. One morning, the streets were full of people going to work, children waiting for school buses and cars lined up at coffee shops. By sunset, those same streets were rivers of blood and broken glass. Neighbors became strangers. Strangers became killers. And families. Families were torn apart before they even understood what was happening. I remember the first night clearly. The news said it was contained. They told us to stay calm, stay home, and wait for updates. But updates never came. The power went out. The phones died. The city that once felt endless became a cage filled with screams. I do not tell you this to scare you. I tell you this because if you are listening, you need to understand the truth. Survival is not about guns or strength or luck. It is about choices. Small choices that mean the difference between breathing another day or becoming food for the dead. This is not just my story. It is a guide, written from memory and blood on how I made it through the first year of the end of the world. 12 months. Each one is harder than the last. If you stay with me, I will tell you exactly what I saw, what I lost, and what I did to survive when everything else collapsed. The first month was not about fighting. It was about running. When the outbreak began, the city was still alive with panic. People thought they could wait it out in their homes, but the dead did not wait. They spread like fire, street by street, house by house, faster than anyone could understand. I made the mistake of staying in my apartment for 3 days. I thought the soldiers would come, that someone would restore order, but the only thing that came was screams. From the window I saw families dragging suitcases, children crying in the parking lot, and men with bats breaking into stores. The dead followed all of them. On the 4th day I finally left. I carried a backpack with water, canned beans, and the pistol I kept from my service. The stairwell smelled of rot. When I reached the street, I realized I was already too late. Cars were smashed together, horns frozen in the night air, glass scattered like ice. A woman was trapped under a car, still moving, still trying to claw at me even though half her body was gone. The hardest lesson of month 1 was this: never follow the crowd. People ran in groups thinking there was safety in numbers, but I watched those groups get torn apart in alleys and highways, their noise attracting the dead like moths to a flame. I survived only because I walked alone, moving through side streets, listening more than I spoke, never staying in one place long enough for the stench of life to draw them near. That month taught me the first rule of the end of the world: if you want to live, you must disappear. But as I learned how to hide from the dead, I discovered something even worse. The living were far more dangerous. The second month was not about running. It was about hunger. Food was the new gold. In the first days, every store had been looted by desperate hands. People fought over bags of rice, bottles of water, and even dog food. By the time I searched, the shelves were empty, the refrigerators smashed, the cans stolen. I learned quickly that hunger doesn't make you weak at first, it makes you reckless. I saw men walking into dark buildings with nothing but sticks, chasing rumors of food. Most never came back out. The sound of one can rolling across a floor was enough to lure the dead. For weeks I rationed what little I had: a few beans, some crackers, and melted chocolate bars. I ate once a day, sometimes less. My stomach growled so loud I thought it would betray me to the dead. The thirst was worse. Without clean water, you die in 3 days. I boiled rainwater in old pots, collected drops from broken air conditioners, and even chewed on wet leaves I found clinging to fences. It wasn't enough. My lips cracked. My skin burned. Every time I swallowed, it felt like glass cutting my throat. It wasn't just me. By the 2nd month, the survivors I met weren't fighting zombies anymore. They were fighting each other. I saw a father stab another man for a single bottle of water. I saw a mother feed her crying baby sugar water made from rain puddles, because that's all she had. One night, I found an old man in a gas station. He was too weak to stand, his hands shaking as he clutched a can of peaches like it was a treasure. His voice cracked when he whispered, "Please, don't take it, I didn't, but I wanted to," and that scared me more than the dead outside. Because hunger changes you, it doesn't just eat your body, it eats your soul. By the end of month 2, I realized the truth. The dead weren't the reason humanity was dying. Hunger was. And then, in the darkness of one abandoned house, I found something that made me question if I was ready for month 3. By the 3rd month, I understood something brutal. Surviving alone kept me safe, but it also made me weaker. You can only carry so much food, only guard so many doors. Can't stay awake for so many nights. So when I stumbled across other survivors, I had to make a choice, trust them, or keep walking. The group I met was small. A young couple, barely out of college, a middle-aged mechanic with grease still under his fingernails, and a woman named Harper, who had been a nurse before the world fell apart. They had barricaded themselves inside an abandoned library, sleeping between bookshelves and cooking on small fires. At first, it felt like hope. We shared stories, divided scraps of food, and even laughed a few times. For a brief moment, I almost forgot about the screams outside, but trust is a dangerous thing in the apocalypse. One night I woke to whispers. The mechanic and the young man were arguing in the corner, their voices low but sharp. The argument was about me, about whether I was worth keeping around, another mouth to feed, the mechanic spat. Why should he get our food? That was the moment I realized, out here, trust wasn't about loyalty. It was about usefulness, so I worked. I fixed their barricades. I stood watch at night. I hunted for scraps in houses too dangerous for the rest of them to enter. Every day I had to prove I was worth the risk. But trust cuts both ways. On the 72nd day, the young couple disappeared. They left in the night, taking half the food with them. No note, no goodbye. Just empty shelves where our cans used to be. Harper tried to calm us, but the damage was done. I saw the mechanic's eyes harden, saw the way his hand lingered too long on his knife. From that moment I slept with one eye open, because the truth about trust is this: the dead will kill you fast, but the living will kill you slow. And by the end of month 3, I couldn't shake the feeling that one of us wasn't going to make it to month 4. Month 4 began with a cold that cut through even the thickest layers of clothing. The nights were the worst. I could see my breath freezing in the air, and my fingers and toes felt like they belonged to someone else. Water froze in every container, and snow covered the streets, making scavenging more dangerous. Hunger and thirst were constant companions. Even a single sip of water or a bite of dry bread felt like a miracle. I lost track of days. Time became meaningless when the world outside your door was silent except for the moans of the dead. I could not remember if it was morning or evening. The sun barely rose above the grey horizon, and the shadows of the trees seemed taller than ever. Each sound felt amplified: the crunch of snow underfoot, the wind through broken windows, the distant groans carried on the icy air. Loneliness crept in like a living thing. It gnawed at my mind in ways the zombies never could. I began seeing shapes in the dark. A shadow by the fireplace would look like a person. I swore I heard voices whispering my name. Once, I thought I saw my mother standing at the doorway of the cabin. She had been dead for years. My heart stopped. I blinked and she was gone. I realized then that survival was as much about keeping my mind alive as it was about keeping my body alive. Food became almost impossible to find. Even the smallest towns I scavenged were stripped bare. Snow covered what little remained, hiding supplies under layers of ice. I learned to melt snow carefully, sterilize it, and ration it for days. One wrong sip could make you sick and leave you too weak to defend yourself. The nights were long, and I began keeping a journal. Not because anyone would read it, but because writing helped me remember I was still human. I wrote about the snow, the hunger, the cold, and the strange shadows that haunted my sleep. And yet even in this frozen, lonely hell, the world outside continued to change. Each day I peeked out from the boarded windows. I could see the forest growing silent, but I also sensed movement in the distance. Something was out there, something watching. One night, as I lay under my thin blanket, shivering and listening to the wind whistle through the broken roof. I saw it clearly, a figure standing at the edge of the trees, too tall to be human, too still to be a zombie. I wanted to run. I wanted to hide, but I could not move. That was the night I understood. The dead were not my only danger anymore. By month 5, I realized staying in one place too long was dangerous. Even the smallest noise could attract the dead, or worse, the living. Survivors roamed the forests and abandoned towns, and not all of them were friendly. Every place held a hidden threat. Each morning, I wrapped myself in layers of worn clothing, grabbed my backpack, and moved quietly through snow-covered streets. I checked abandoned houses and stores, listening for movement. The dead were fewer but still deadly. I learned to read signs. A slightly open door, footprints in the snow, a broken window. Each could hide danger. Supplies were running low. Snow covered the ground, making hunting small animals harder. I set traps for rabbits and squirrels and melted snow for water. Hunger never left me. It gnawed at my stomach constantly, reminding me that each day required careful effort. At night, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying shadows and shapes that could be dead, human, or something I could not name. The fear became part of daily life. One evening I spotted a group moving in formation, carrying torches. They were human, deliberate, coordinated, not zombies. I froze, heart pounding. I packed my journal, tightened my backpack, and slipped into the darkness. Staying was no longer an option. By the end of month 5, I understood something chilling. The dead were predictable, but humans were beginning to organize. Next month will test me in ways the first 4 months never could. By month 6, I had found a small cabin that offered some shelter from both the dead and the living. It was not much, but it was mine for now. I knew staying put too long was dangerous, but I could not keep moving forever. I needed food, safety, and some sense of control. I began small-scale farming. Potatoes, beans, and corn became my lifeline. Each seed planted was a small victory, a reminder that life could persist in this broken world. I dug carefully, watered sparingly, and marked rows with sticks. It was exhausting work, but it brought a strange sense of peace. Preserving food became essential. I dried herbs, salted meats, and stored what I could in hidden nooks of the cabin. Every jar, every bundle was a promise of survival. The routine gave my day structure, and that structure strengthened my mind as much as my body. I built lookout posts around the cabin, simple platforms in the trees, and small barricades at the doors. Nights were still long and cold, but at least I could see danger coming from a distance. Even with these small victories, the forest outside never felt quiet. Shadows moved in ways I could not always explain. Sounds reached my ears that had no source. Even as I planted seeds for the next harvest, I could not shake the feeling that I was being watched. The dead were predictable, but the forest seemed alive in ways I could not understand. Next month, I would face dangers I could not prepare for with barricades or crops alone. By month 7, I realized surviving alone was not enough. The cabin and my crops gave me stability, but they did not protect me from the loneliness or from threats I could not handle by myself. I needed allies. I began seeking out other survivors cautiously. Trust was rare in this new world. Some approached with hands open and smiles, but their eyes held hunger, desperation, or something darker. I learned to judge quickly. Every handshake, every shared meal could be a trap. Eventually, I found a small group, a former teacher, a carpenter, and a young woman who had once worked in a pharmacy. They were as wary of me as I was of them, but we shared what we had, divided duties, and kept watch in turns. Alone, we were vulnerable. Together, we were stronger. I taught them how to set traps, store food, and recognize signs of both zombies and humans. They taught me things I had forgotten, how to conserve energy, how to make tools from scraps, and how to move without leaving a trace. Even as cooperation brought safety, it brought tension. Small disagreements flared into arguments. One night, I caught the carpenter sneaking out with a knife tucked in his belt. Was it for protection or for something else? I did not know, but it reminded me that humans were often more dangerous than the dead. By the end of month 7, our small group felt like a fragile family. But I knew it would not last forever. The world outside the cabin was changing, growing harsher, and next month would force us to test everything we had learned, or we would not survive. By month 8, I understood that surviving was not just about having food or shelter. It was about preparing for the worst. Nature was unpredictable, humans were dangerous, and the dead were always a threat. We could not rely on luck. We began building storage. Every scrap of food, every clean bottle of water, was carefully preserved. Potatoes went into cool, dry corners. Beans and grains were stacked in airtight containers. The meat we caught from hunting was salted or smoked. Even small things mattered. Sharpened knives, extra blankets, and hidden caches for emergencies. The cabin became a fortress. Lookout posts were established. Makeshift alarms made from cans and string rattled at the slightest noise. We reinforced doors and windows with whatever we could find. The dead were predictable, but humans were cunning. Despite the constant work, there were moments of hope. I watched the young woman Harper tend to the crops with careful hands, sunlight catching her hair. I saw life growing from the earth we had claimed, a reminder that not everything was lost. Still, fear lingered. One morning I found footprints in the snow leading to our cabin. Too large, too precise to be animal. Someone had been watching us. I did not know if they were friend or foe. By the end of month 8 I realized something. Survival depended not just on skill but on vigilance, and even that might not be enough. The world outside was changing, growing darker. Next month our patience and cunning would be tested like never before. By month 9 the world outside had become unrecognizable. Roads were broken, towns abandoned, and the forests stretched endlessly, hiding both the dead and the living. To survive we needed more than shelter and food. We needed knowledge. Each day I sent out scouts, marking rivers, abandoned farms, and any signs of danger. Footprints, broken fences, discarded supplies, everything told a story if you knew how to read it. The dead shuffled predictably, but humans moved differently. Some were desperate, some organized, and some I could not yet understand. I walked the snowy hills, watching from a distance. A small horde passed through a valley, dragging what remained of a once bustling village. I noted their paths, their behavior, and the way they reacted to sound. Knowledge was survival, and each observation could save or cost a life. We fortified the cabin even more. Lookouts were doubled, traps refined, and escape routes memorized. Trust remained a fragile thing. Every stranger was a potential threat. I had learned that the dead could kill quickly, but humans killed slowly, deliberately, with intention. At night I mapped by candlelight, drawing lines and marking safe zones, but I could not shake the feeling of being watched. Something in the forest moved differently now. Not the dead, not animals, something else. Calculated, patient, and waiting. By the end of month 9, I understood one terrifying truth. We were no longer alone. The living were beginning to organize, and next month, we would see just how dangerous that could become. By month 10, our cabin was more than a shelter. It was a fortress, but a fortress was only as strong as the people defending it. We reinforced every wall, hammered spikes into weak spots, and set up barricades to slow anyone or anything that tried to breach us. Every corner, every window, every door was inspected daily. Training became our routine. We practiced quietly, learning how to defend ourselves with knives, bats, and whatever we could find. Coordination was critical. One mistake could be fatal. Even with defenses, I knew the walls could not hold forever. Food and water were carefully managed. Rations were measured, supplies rotated, and emergency reserves hidden. Each small victory, an extra can of beans, a barrel of fresh water, felt like winning a war. Tension within the group grew. Hunger and fear magnified the smallest disagreements. Trust was tested constantly. A misplaced glance, a whispered complaint, even a silence could spark fear or suspicion. The living were now as dangerous as the dead. At night I patrolled the perimeter, listening. The forest beyond our walls was quiet, but I knew better than to believe it was safe. Movement lingered in the shadows, deliberate and patient. I could not yet see what it was, but I felt it, a presence that did not belong to the dead. And as I stared into the darkness, I understood something chilling. The dead were predictable. The living, the organized, the patient, they were something far worse. By month 11, we could no longer ignore the signs. Tracks in the snow, fires in the distance, the faint sound of voices that were not ours. A hostile group of survivors had discovered our cabin. They moved carefully with purpose. They were organized, armed, and willing to kill for food, water, or territory. The first skirmish came at dusk. Shadows moved along the tree line. One of our lookout posts spotted them too late. Arrows thrown, rocks and shouting erupted. We scrambled, defending every wall, every window, every barricade. The living fought differently from the dead. They anticipated, they planned, they exploited mistakes. We realized quickly that weapons alone were not enough. Knowledge of the terrain, teamwork, and courage mattered more. Each member of the group had to trust the others completely. Mistakes could not be forgiven. We reinforced escape routes, created hidden exits, and planned contingencies. Nights became longer as we patrolled, listened, and prepared. Every noise set our hearts racing, every shadow felt alive. The tension was suffocating. By the end of the month, we survived. But survival had a cost. Half of our small group had vanished, gone into the night, captured, or worse. And even as we tended to the wounded and mourned the lost, I sensed something more dangerous approaching, something that neither the dead nor desperate humans had shown us before. We had survived the night, but by morning, the rules of survival were about to change again. By the final month, we had learned to survive, but survival was no longer enough. The world had changed, and so had we. Our small cabin, fortified and supplied, became more than shelter. It became a symbol of what could last if we held together. We planted seeds, repaired barricades, and shared knowledge of traps, foraging, and defense. Each day brought small victories. A rabbit caught, a patch of potatoes growing, or the quiet reassurance that our walls still stood. Yet even in these moments of stability, the fear never left. The forest around us seemed alive with eyes and whispers we could not explain. Shadows moved too deliberately, and sounds carried farther than they should. Night after night I watched the tree line, knowing we were not alone. Not just the dead and not just desperate humans. Something else was coming. Our group worked tirelessly, teaching each other skills and preparing for a long-term future. We began thinking beyond mere survival. How to grow food, maintain water, and preserve knowledge for whoever might come after us. Hope felt fragile, but it was there. And then one evening, while checking the perimeter, I saw them. Figures in the distance, neither fleeing nor wandering. They were watching, waiting, and moving with a purpose I had never seen before. The year was ending, but the true test of survival was just beginning. Yes, I survived the first year. I walked through hunger, fear, and loss, and I am still here. But survival has its cost. Friends were lost. Trust often brought danger. The dead were not the worst. It was the living. Quiet mornings in ruined streets reminded me how fragile life had become. Every step felt uncertain. Every small victory, finding food, repairing fences, was temporary. Nothing lasts, and yet I feel it. Something is coming. Calculated, patient, and far more dangerous than anything I faced before. The first year tested our bodies and minds. The next will test our very humanity. Remember this. Survival is not permanent. Safety is fleeting. The dead are predictable. The living and whatever is beyond them are not. Stay alert. Stay alive. Year 2 will not forgive mistakes. And mistakes are easy to make.